introduction, and then I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, thank you so much for your patience. My name is Majda Anwar. I'm the Director of Marketing for the Pedowitz Group. I'm very excited today to have our presenter, Colby Renton, who is our digital transformation expert. Colby has been helping many organizations transform for over a decade. And so, it's been very interesting for her, and she'll tell you a lot about this, to see how COVID-19 has become this catalyst. And more importantly, what are we going to do with that catalyst? How is that going to happen? So without further ado, I will, actually, before I do that, a couple of house rules. Since we are on GoToMeeting versus GoToWebinar, I do ask everyone to stay on mute. If you have a question, please ask in the chat window. I'm happy to, to field those questions for Colby. If you guys have any other questions, we are reserving time at the end of the presentation, 10 or 15 minutes for a QA as well. So thank you for joining. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Colby. Colby, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So as Majda mentioned, my name is Colby Renton. I'm a Vice President and Principal here at the Pedowitz Group, and have been very active in helping companies transform, whether they're small transformations or large marketing-wide or marketing and sales-wide transformations, often to a more digital environment. For about the last decade, I've been with Pedowitz for several years, and in a number of roles, but always as a consultant and a strategist. And so I've had a great opportunity to work with customers that are massive multi-billion-dollar companies and help through those transformations to smaller, independent, couple hundred million companies, and they're going through what would be perceived as a smaller transformation, something like things that people don't typically think as transformations, like just implementing lead management. That's usually kind of disruptive to people and disruptive to an environment. So all of these can be transformations, whether it's implementing a new process or a campaigns process, or implementing a whole digital transformation for the business, big or small. They all sort of follow the same path, and the same things need to happen. But I've had the benefit of doing it myself and living through it on the inside. And actually, I hired Pedowitz when I was a client several years ago to help me start the movement within my organization, and then found that it was a lot more fun to not be in the middle of the politics and to go on the outside. But it actually gave me perspective that I would have otherwise not had, which was, now I can see it. As a consultant, I can see what's going to happen, where the politics are going to play, what people are going to influence and interfere. And so it's enabled me to create some IP for the company that helps us to lay out a roadmap for digital transformation. So that's in this pack, and I hope that you find it useful. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward pretty quickly here into what we're going to cover. I wanted to talk a little bit about what the industry is telling us. Of course, a bunch of companies jumped on the need to research and understand what's happening in the industry and what is changing, or what is changing or has changed as a result of this pandemic. And we're all here, and we don't know when it's going to end. And so, now there was a period of sort of, oh my gosh, now what? And then it sort of, the dust sort of settled, and then now it's like, okay, now what? So the panic went away, and now it's more of a, we have to do something. So we're going to look at a little bit at some of the data. We're going to look and talk about how sales and marketing, what we're seeing and what the research is showing that sales and marketing are doing, and how they're responding to this pandemic and this, frankly, to this new way of working. And I don't like to say it because it sounds so cliche, but it's a new way for a lot of people of working. As Majda mentioned, we've been a digital virtual company for our entire existence. So we're all used to working from home, but so when everybody else started freaking out about working from home, it was sort of like, okay, nothing's really changed for us, but we travel a lot as consultants. So we're not traveling as much, obviously, because people are not in their offices. Most people are at home. So we're going to talk about how people are responding and how marketing and sales specifically are responding to the change and the disruption in our environment. And then we're going to talk about, really get into the nitty gritty and talk about how do you actually map and execute a digital transformation. And again, I'll use that digital transformation as a small change that you have to make or a big change. It can be either. It really absolutely can be either. So we're going to cover that. But I'm a data nerd, so I'm going to jump right into data. I wanted to look at industry research, and I have been looking at industry research. And if you haven't, there's quite a bit out there already on what's changed. And so I started with this is research that Adobe had done or had commissioned to help indicate what is actually happening or what has COVID-19 done to cause disruption. How's it actually manifested in our business? And what we see the most is obviously a decrease in demand in products and services. That tanked at the very beginning. We're starting to see it go the other way now. It's starting to lift up a little bit in certain industries. And then, that inability to meet customer demand, supply chain is broken. I have a client, it's very interesting. I have a client that has been, they supply data storage, and they are seeing disruption in that one of their biggest customers is a manufacturer of airplanes, and they're not manufacturing as many airplanes because the demand from Delta and United and all of those companies isn't there, and they're not demanding them because people aren't flying. So that supply chain causes there's a breakdown in there, and it's, people aren't flying. So the companies aren't making as much money, so they're not demanding new airplanes or looking for new airplanes or to increase their fleet. And as a result, this company is not actually getting as much business as they were before. So it's causing this disruption of that decreased demand, but then also an inability to meet a customer demand because the supply chain actually is breaking in some places where we haven't ever seen it break before. And a lot of people aren't considering that breakdown of supply chain, because most of the time, most of us think, especially in marketing, think supply chain doesn't really affect us. I mean, supply chain is what affects us directly in marketing, but it affects our customers. And in marketing, we have to be thinking about our customers all the time. And what are they experiencing? What is the disruption for them? What's caused change in their business? And how are we going to help them through this time? Those are things we need to be thinking about. And of course, the breakdown of face-to-face sales, everybody's experienced that. I've heard it so many times. It's actually like, yep, okay, your sales needs to change. And that increased need for customer support in a more digital environment. And then, of course, marketing having that need now that we've not really, some people are able to put off. And frankly, having been doing this as long as I have, I've talked about marketing transformation and digital transformation in that space for a long time with a number of customers. But so many people say it's too big, I don't want to deal with it, or I don't want to go down that path quite yet. You don't really have a choice anymore. Now we have to. So that's kind of where we are, using the same sourcing, similar sourcing, Forrester, IDC's, a number of organizations. Sales has evolved, obviously, and this is primarily focused on B2B, but the go-to-market models and how we approach the market has had to shift and change based on what's happened. So we, some of the research that Forrester and eMarketer, we gathered this from a number of sources, are telling us that they have to make a change in things like e-com. If you have e-com on your website, e-com absolutely have to, it's something that has gone to the top of the list. It's because we need to make it easier, faster for customers to make a purchasing decision, even if it's an lower level entry point purchasing decision. They need to be able to make that decision and then accelerate quickly so that we're not slowing them down in the process. So the drive for e-com totally gone up. In the B2B marketplace, the buyers say that they are kind of got assimilated or adjusted to this sort of Amazon kind of approach to making purchases. Like we make purchases very quickly, and we can go and we can research and we can find and compare and we can look at reviews and we can make a purchase, and we can do that almost effortlessly. So the friction to buy has reduced. What we're seeing now is an increased demand for helping our customers reduce friction to buy. And that that really means that they're trying to go digital. As much as I don't like that phrase, it is that. It's how do we reduce that friction to buy, and what does that look like, and recreate in a B2B space that Amazon model of easy to buy right in front of you all the time. And the answer isn't always e-com. It might just be that we have created a customer workflow and an engine that creates a more systematic approach to when we find out there's buying intent, to getting them in touch with the right person at the right time. And then the direct to consumer, if you're in a D2C space, then that direct to consumer, a third of consumers plan to do at least 40% of their shopping from D2C companies over the next several years. That's a pretty significant shift. It hasn't been quite that way in the past. So those are some shifts that are happening in the market already, and how some companies are adjusting to it as it is. I like McKinsey for research. I think they do some really interesting research, and some things that have changed in B2B overall. What we're seeing, and we're still seeing, this was as of, this started in April, and it's continuing on. They're continuing on with the same research, but what they're finding is that it actually is up and down. So some companies are increasing spend, some are decreasing spend, and I listed over there for you just so you could give a sample, or see a sample of who's increasing spend and who's decreasing spend in terms of the industries. But what it really says is that you have to look at your business and think about your business and your buyers. So when we have another client that we work with, and they wanted to go to market and have this message go to everyone, this similar message go to everyone of this specific title and role. And we said, who's actually buying right now though? Well, when we went through the actual analysis and figured out, and just through discussion is the analysis that I'm referring to, figured out that really the only people in their market that are actually buying was government. We said, okay, well then why are we going to spend all this money on inbound activity trying to cast a wide net when we know that right now the only industry in your market that's buying is government? Let's focus in on them. Let's zero in on them. So that's how it impacts us and changes our marketing strategy. But it's important to understand and think about your buyers, your industries, and think about who's spending, who's increasing spend, and who's not spending, who's decreasing spend, who's holding their money tight right now. And a lot of it, if you sell to public companies or larger companies, you're seeing in the news who is laying off people, who's reducing expenses, cutting costs, all that kind of stuff. You can find that on almost anybody's website or in any public relations, PR press releases, any kind of stuff like that. So on PR Newswire, anything. So understanding your consumer and understanding what their consumers are doing is critical to ensuring your success through this time that's, quite frankly, doesn't have an end in sight. In terms of what's changed with the B2B consumer, I found this really interesting. This is also from McKinsey, same research, that two major things that stuck out for me. One of them is that the self-service idea in B2B. When we used to talk about self-service, we used to talk about it in a B2C space. I go on to Amazon or to clothing vendor or whatever that I like, and I just go in and I self-serve, and I can purchase whatever I want. But there is an absolute increase in the preference for self-service channels. So people want to be able to research, evaluate, and make a purchase without really communicating or engaging with the seller or a buyer. We know that. Historically, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Challenger sale, that came out in 2009, so it's been quite some time. And they've built a corporate executive board who released that book originally in 2009, has created an entire empire around it. But they found at the time, 2009, that consumers were 57% of the way through the buying journey before engaging with a supplier or a vendor. What's changed in this now is as a result of COVID, as a result of this catalyst, is that consumers are already into the evaluation stage, already into, farther into the evaluation stage, further into research in a self-service model. They're really, you see the lighter blue on that. they are really in a self-serve mode. And what that means for us in marketing is that we have to supply the right content at the right time to engage the customer where they are in the buying journey, so that we're not just blasting everybody with this same sort of messaging. The other side of it is that digital interactions are twice as important as they were prior to COVID, which is actually insane. I feel like I've been saying it for years, but now there's actually a reason. There's a reason for people to do that. It's because we're all working. Everybody is working from home. Not everybody, but a mass majority of the market is working in their home environment, in a home context, and so their digital interactions are absolutely critical. But you can see that during when Forrester or McKinsey rather did this research, they found that people are experiencing, what we're experiencing is this digital enabled sales interactions has doubled. So when you couple that with self-service and the digital interaction, are we going to retrain all of our salespeople to engage with our customers digitally, or are we going to take our marketing departments, who actually probably are pretty fluid and to some degree in digital engagement and digital interaction, and help and collaborate with sales to create a better, more digital environment? So that's
Colby, we've got a great question in the chat window from Stephanie, and that is, would you agree that the degree of the buyer's engagement with a seller is dependent on the complexity and the cost of the product or service? So, like, you maybe we're talking about like more simple widget sort of software versus, I know some of our clients have like literally 18 month to 2 year sales engagement. Would you say that's a factor in how the organization would go digital?
Yes, it definitely is. I think that what I'm seeing happening though is that, so we're seeing an increase in the number of people that are involved in the buying decision. That matters. And it matters because it went from an average of 4 to 5 to 9 is the current average of number of people involved in making a purchasing decision. That means for marketing, we have to amplify our marketing communication and engagement. We have to engage more people at the same time with slightly different messages to drive a conversation or a digital dialogue or a dialogue internally together. But it's the effect that it's having, or that we're seeing that it's having on our customers who have longer sales cycles or buying cycles with their customers, is that they're actually compressing those cycles, because marketing is now, what we're seeing is what we're all probably familiar, if you're in marketing, you're familiar with a kind of standard 2-week cadence of communication that we send out to our consumer. That's compressing. We're seeing that in like every 3 days is about average right now, rather than every 2 weeks or every week cadence. We're seeing an every 3-day cadence, and it's compressing that communication. It's compressing it's sort of resulting in an accelerated timeline. I have a client who said, no, our sales cycle is 2 years. It's always been 2 years. And we said, okay, a lot of our clients are increasing cadence with their customers. And as they've increased their cadence right now, a lot of companies are investing in making purchasing decisions faster, because they're in a place right now where they need to make faster purchasing decisions. Does that answer the question, Maj? Because I'm not seeing it directly.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it also makes the argument for, and I'm pretty sure if we've got marketers on the call here, might have seen a little bit of resistance into how sales should approach, this new digital world. And that's probably a good, probably a good point they bring up. But in reality, things have gotten more complex. The buying cycle, can still be as long, but interaction is absolutely necessary to be able to influence all members of the buying center. So for those of you who are maybe perhaps struggling with that sales and marketing alignment, I think that's a really good point to bring up to your sales leadership, so that way you can bring more alignment to digital transformation versus, no, we're gonna keep on doing what we do.
Yeah. And it's a good point. And I think one of the things that we hear, or we've been hearing a lot more of, is, of course, at the beginning in March, April, May, there was this like panic. I have a client that had to go out and buy 10,000 laptops in one day because everybody went home, and they all worked on desktops in their office. And it was literally, okay, then we have to, how do we self-serve our employees, 10,000 of them, to add data security or security onto their new laptops that they just got? How do they, dial into a VPN? How does all this stuff work? And they had to do that almost instantaneously, so they had no disruption in their business. Things like that have gone bonkers. That happened at the beginning. That was March, April, May. Then things started to settle down, and it was kind of like, all right, when is this going to be over? And then now it seems to be shifting back towards, okay, now how do we adjust to this? Let's be logical and think about this and think about how do we adjust to this. But what our clients are asking us are things like, what do we do first? Because there's so much to do to change the way we've been doing things. We're kind of out of that panic mode. We're out of that, like, when is this going to be over mode, so we can go back to normal. And we're kind of accepting that there's it's almost like the stages of grieving. There's an acceptance of this is how it's going to be now. And then now we're in this mode of, all right, now what do we need to do? Let's get back to business. And that's where we are now. We're in that, let's get back to business, which is why I felt like this discussion around digital transformation was relevant and pertinent now.
So Colby, we've got another, just a clarification question from Christine. When you say 3 days for interactions, can you expand on that, and especially when a business that is a typically 2 to 4 quarter purchasing cycle?
Yeah, so I would encourage you to test. Now is the time to test. So the example that I gave was a couple, I mean, it's what we're seeing pretty consistently. We ourselves at TPG are compressing our timelines ourselves for when we're communicating with our customers. But I would test it, because you have to watch very closely your unsubscribes. If your unsubscribes start to tick up, you're going too hard. You're going too much too fast. If you're not getting a lot of unsubscribes, you're still staying at or below that industry average, then you want to just stay right where you are. But it's happening across the industry. It's not unique to any one industry. But I would 3 to 5 days. If you're at a 2-week cadence right now, I'd try 4 days, 5 days max. If you're at a 2 weeks cadence, try 5 days and see what happens. And try that for a couple of hits. One communication does not make a story. It doesn't actually tell you a good story. But if you try that 5 days and you start to see your unsubs go up, then I would dial it back, maybe move back to 7 days, business days, and see what happens. But we're definitely seeing that compression, regardless of the sales cycle. We're seeing a compression of the frequency of communication. And I know what you're thinking, content. Oh my gosh, that's like a lot more content. But you don't have to go crazy on content right away. Go ahead, Maj.
So Colby, I know we've been talking a lot about the stats, and I know you've got a lot to share, but I wanted to make sure we had time to also talk about the road mapping and how, from an approach perspective, what is the approach that these organizations can do to make digital transformation happen? So if you can share a couple more, I just want to make sure we have time to talk about the actual action, like what's the next steps to approach.
Yeah. So we'll share this pack with you when we're done. So I wanted to share a couple of highlights from that research. I don't need to read it. I'm not going to read to you. It would feel like insulting your intelligence, so I don't need to do that. But I wanted you to have it, because if you have to make a case internally, it's important to understand how the consumer has changed and why it's important to start to test and try different things to engage your customers in a different way than you have before. So what it means to us, this is the time to double down on your customer experience investments. It absolutely is. It's time to test. It's time to try new things. It's time to engage customers. And if you're in an acquisition mode, both acquisition and customer. But a lot of times marketers that we work with focus very heavily on on acquisition of net new, but spend very little time marketing specifically to their customers, when they will very openly say 80% of our revenue comes off of existing customers. It's a blind spot. You need to start focusing on the right side of this loop and think about your customer, their experience, and engage them and try and re-engage them and expand their portfolio, because that's an easier sale for sales. And if you haven't already aligned your customer journey, not the buying process, but the customer's process, to your personas and content, now would be the time to do that. So how we're responding, what we're looking at and what we're seeing, this is actually, I didn't cite it, but this is actually from McKinsey as well. how things have changed. And you just see field sales transitioning to work via videocon and phone. That's the vast majority, and then partial sales force working from video conference and phone. So you see those make up the majority of them, and this is by country. But really, the U.S. is down there at the bottom, just above the all line. In the United States, there's a significant shift in the way sales is selling, and that's really important when you think about what we're doing to enable sales. How are we enabling sales? Because sales enablement meant something different in January than it means today, and we need to be thinking about what that really looks like. The sales channels, I think, is important to understand before the pandemic started and after. Again, this is just data that you can use and leverage and flip through as we send you the recording and the PDF afterwards. For marketers, I thought this was interesting. This came from McKinsey also, and I thought that it was really interesting because you see that one line right in the middle that's grayed out. In that self-service model, the live chat functionality that we use as marketers has skyrocketed. It's gone bonkers since, pre-pandemic. It's increased significantly. The use of has increased significantly. Organizations absolutely are using that to engage customers on their website. It makes so much sense. And if you're not doing it, you need to be looking into platforms like Drift or other, I don't know, Mash, throw a couple out there. There's so many. But now is the time to be considering that, because if you look across all of the things that we do, that one is the one that most vendors and suppliers and partners, our clients, seem to be investing in, and McKinsey found the same thing. So we'll talk about that. Obviously this is related to the heightened need for an up-to-date and more proactive communication. That increased customer engagement and retention. Most of our customers were encouraging to double down on your existing customers and your expansion across different solutions, often a blind spot in marketing, but absolutely doing that. And then the value of the experience. So this is where we're seeing a lot of transformation. We're seeing a lot of transformation in what should our digital customer experience be, and how do we go and get there? What does that actually look like? And so we're going to go into what that means for us. This is the impact of that. So what does it mean that the customer needs a better experience? It means we need to be better aligned with sales. It means we need to be looking at our customer intelligence data. As marketers, we have that. We have that data, particularly if you have a marketing automation platform. If you have digital data that they may not have, if it's not embedded into your CRM and they can't see all that digital activity, we need to be sharing it with them, creating customer insights that are going to help you build that relationship with sales. That's what it means. But that is a transformation. That is a change in the way that you've done business in the past. Most of our clients do not have that very tightly aligned relationship with sales and marketing. So what's actually happening is we're seeing that there's a massive influx in organizations that are focusing on a digital transformation initiative, is what they're calling it broadly, but it's actually, it can be, again, big or small, and it doesn't matter what it looks like. If it's just implementing lead management or customer experience, frankly, again, customer experience is where we're seeing it, but it could be an overhaul completely in how marketing markets. So I grabbed some data points from different sources just to share what we're seeing. That the real emphasis right now is on digital transformation and how they engage their customers, how our customers are engaging their customers in a more meaningful and relevant way. And so I'm going to flip right through how do we execute this transformation journey? How do you actually do something with that? So the areas that we're seeing, the major areas, the evolution of sales, this absolute requirement for everybody to go digital, to create a better customer experience and acknowledge the fact that our buyers are buying in a different way, are the things that absolutely have to be the tenets on your mind of how we're thinking through an actual transformation. One big thing that you need to do as you embark on any digital transformation, I have highlighted in red over there. If you are lacking or missing a clear digital strategy from executive leadership not providing support or seeing the value in investing in digital transformation right now, you are already dead in the water. It is the new competitive battleground. It has to be, and it's because everybody is adapting. Everybody thinks that our businesses tanked. We went crazy because we've been in the digital marketing space and digital communication for a long time. We know how to do it, so it's like it went bonkers. Everyone of our clients were doing change orders that they were doing internal process, but now they want to do customer engagement. How do we get our executives on board? How do we help them understand? That's why we did a lot of research and have found all this research on, okay, let me help you understand and sell your executives on why this has to happen now. But to actually get started and what that roadmap looks like, to us, it covers these 6 major areas: defining it, assessing, design, plan, execute, and sustain. Looks simple on my pretty little roadmap. I made it look simple on purpose, but what that really looks like: defining that vision, understanding what it is you want to be in the long term. What's the vision, and what goals do you have that will support that vision? And define the value. What is the value you're going to get if you achieve that vision? And being able to articulate that and verbalize it, document it, whatever it is, if you can present it that way and define what that's going to be, what this transformation will look like, again, big or small, if you can define the vision, the goals, and the value for the business, then you're starting way ahead of where other people are. The next step in any digital transformation is to assess your current state of being. So now you know what your vision is and what the value is and what your goals are. Now you have to assess your capability internally of whatever that is. So I'm going to pick on lead management because it's easy, or customer experience, since we've been talking about it. How well are you actually creating a really good customer experience? How frictionless is that customer experience? Is the customer experience about them, or is it more about what you want to say to them about you? It's what I call navel gazing. So what's it really about? And really understanding what is that customer experience? Define it. What is it? What is customer experience to you? And then assessing, do you have the capabilities in the organization? Can you check the box across all those things that make up a good customer experience? Then creating a strategic roadmap and understanding, okay, now we know where our gaps are and what we need to fill. Then you need a strategic roadmap, and you're going to need to align, and we'll talk about that in a second. Then you take your strategic roadmap and turn it into a plan. That's your strategy to action plan, or SIA. I always call it SIA, strategy into action, but strategy to action plan. You have to have a strategy to action plan in order to actually achieve anything in digital transformation or any transformation. Initiate to deploy, you need to actually put your plan in action. That's the next step. And then to sustain it. Most executives don't care if you achieve a project. No, it's sort of like great, that's awesome. But how are you going to sustain the value that you created in improving your customer experience in this example? So the value is going to be that ongoing monitoring and maintenance and changes to the customer experience. Now, this is an eye chart, but this is actually a roadmap. So we've created a roadmap that breaks this down into what I would consider to be more consumable chunks, but it might not feel that way because it's a lot on one slide. But defining your vision, goals, and values, we just talked about. Document that. You have to write it down. Assessing organizational capabilities. I picked out customer experience, which sits under customer engagement for us. We use these 5 major areas: strategy, customer engagement, people, revenue operations, and data and technology, because that's what our customers are usually looking to solve. Problems that they're looking to solve fall into one of those buckets. And it might be, do we have the right people on the bus to get us where we're going? Or it might be, an overall, how do we become more customer centric? It can be any of those things. Customer experience, how do we create a better customer experience? Or how do we clean up our data and data management and governance, and what should that look like? So usually it falls into one of these things, and it could be multiple of these things, but then you have to assess whatever it is. Again, I picked on customer experience, which sits under customer engagement, how capable you are there. And then go through design, and that's designing that strategic roadmap. What that really means is you take that customer experience, that one bit, and you analyze the capability. then you analyze the tasks, all the things that you need to do to become or create a better customer experience. Prioritize those initiatives, identify any barriers that you're going to have to achieving the goal around that specific task, and then create a roadmap of, okay, here's what we're going to do. We have all these tasks. These are the things. They identify the dependencies. These are all the things that we need to do, and document that as a roadmap. And then you take that to the stakeholders, because then it comes across the executive stakeholders. Then it comes across as you've put some thought into this. It's not like you're just saying, we need to improve our customer experience without actually thinking about what you need to do to improve the customer experience. So you then go and secure stakeholder agreement and alignment. You might need your CSO or sales executive, or your revenue CRO, your chief revenue officer, or you might need the head of IT. You may need, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but you need to go and secure stakeholder agreement, but you need to go with a plan. So that's your roadmap. Then you need to take your plan, your roadmap, and actually assign accountability. In my old company, I worked for a leadership development company for about a decade, and was trained to death on leadership development and change management. And what we always said was joint accountability is no accountability. So for every task or initiative that you identify in the previous step, you have to assign a single person accountable for executing that task. And then they need to take that task and go after stakeholders that task influences. So that might be the next level down. You might be talking at the C-suite in your design strategic roadmap, but you might be talking to managers and individual contributors in the stakeholder level. So you might be talking to the CRM admin. That could be somebody that's a stakeholder there that you need to identify. Then you need to identify whether or not you have the skills in-house, if you need to buy them, build them, or lease them to get the skills done so that you can actually execute against your initiative. And then build a communications plan so that those stakeholders, those senior level stakeholders we secured in RM3, those people are informed and they don't feel like this is just another thing that marketing is doing. And then establish your KPIs for this particular piece of it, for these initiatives or tasks. So not the overall vision, goals, and values, we've already done that, the KPIs for the specific individual things that need to happen. And then we move into the execution mode. And in execution, we're going through discovery, design, we build, test, deploy, and optimize. It's a pretty standard execution, but that's where it gets down to a project level. And then once we actually deploy, we can start to optimize over time. I would look at that every couple of months, and then look at sustaining. Now we have this vision, goals, and values, and we can say, we've gone through this process, we've executed this initiative or effort, and now we're at this outcomes place where we can say, this is the value that we're able to add to the business by having done all of these things. Majda, I know you said you were going to leave 15 minutes. I left 5.
Yes, you did. So yeah, I wanted to open this up for more questions. So obviously, Colby has taken us through a number of statistics around COVID, around barriers, and how people can approach this. But we'd like to take the last couple of minutes if anyone has any additional questions around, okay, great, you guys showed us a roadmap, what does that mean? Or hey, I'm having this particular issue. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions in this last couple of minutes. All right.
Yeah, I was going to say, you monitoring the questions? There are a lot of them in there.
I am. Yes, we've been actually doing a great job of covering them while we've been going through. But I think I just got a private message. Let's see. Okay, I think this is a question that everyone wants to ask. How long does digital transformation take? First question my executives are going to ask.
Yep. So the best answer that I can give you for that, and because everybody asks, the best answer I can give you for that is that digital transformation takes less time if you have executive support. If you do not have executive support or executive buy-in, it is going to take you infinitely longer. I would double it if you don't have executive support. An average transformation, let's say we're transforming the entire marketing environment from a more traditional marketing environment to a digital transformation, to a digital marketing environment, I would expect that to take about 2 years, 1 to 2 years. If you don't have executive support, it's going to take you 4 years. That's a very clean answer, and I'm basing that 100% on just my own experience and having done this with many clients. And you see, I put this up here, the barriers and challenges, because I want you to be aware of what you are likely to come up against when you're looking to change something. These are very common challenges, but to help you identify where your trouble spots might be and where you might want to go, we actually created an assessment that will help you understand where you are today and how you can get to the next place. It's actually kind of cool because you can choose your current state and where you want to be, and then the response that you'll get is very customized to you. It'll shoot to your inbox. I put a flow on here because I didn't know how else to do it, and then allow you to click on it, although you'll get the pack. But if you hit our website and you scroll down, you'll see that get started with digital transformation in 15 minutes. You can take that revenue acquisition assessment, and you'll have a pretty clear idea of what you're doing really well and some areas where you have a gap in where you are today and where you want to be. And then you'll get a really good sense of the things that you can do and what you can do right now. And if you go back to the slide I showed you a couple minutes ago and really think through those 6 steps, what are the things that we need to do? You'll be well on your way into starting your transformation, or maybe you've already started and it'll just accelerate or help you to accelerate and think through all the things you need to think through in order to be successful. Does that help, Maj?
I think it does. And just one more comment, from the chat window, well, 2 to 4 years sounds intimidating. Everyone will ultimately need to transform digitally. And even the smallest steps will show ROI, so you can continue to build on it. I think that's a really good point. When we say 2 to 4 years, it's not like you're going to be in a black box and you're going to be analog, I'll say analog, for that time. You're going to have incremental improvements,
Yes.
setting that expectation and having not only that executive sponsor, that executive advocate for digital transformation is what you need. So we are at the top of our time. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope you learned something. If you have any other questions, we are sending a follow-up email with the recording with all the lovely statistics that Colby shared. And if you want to discuss your digital transformation, if you're stuck and you want to talk to Colby, we're more than happy. We'll be including her Calendly link for you guys to set up a time with her and discuss that. Yes, and the deck will be sent as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.